والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحابته أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. سبحانك لا فهم لنا إلا ما فهمتنا إنك أنت الجواد الكريم. وقل رب زدني علما. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إن الدين عند الله الإسلام ما اختلف الذين أوتوا الكتاب إلا من بعد ما جاءهم العلم بغيا بينهم ومن يكفر بآيات الله فإن الله سريع الحساب. صدق الله مولانا العظيم. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is announcing to humanity until the day of judgment that there is only one system of life which is acceptable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the very purpose for which He has created the human being. Inna ad-dina inda Allahi al-Islam. The religion, the system that's acceptable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Islam. And here, ad-deen, the word deen is used. Inna ad-deen. What is deen? Deen basically means a system or a way. And in this context, it's referring to the system of belief and the belief set and the basic injunctions and the basic principles that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made common for all of the systems which the Prophets ﷺ from Adam ﷺ to Muhammad ﷺ have come with. So number one, belief. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one. He has no partner. His attributes, His names. This is a static. It never changes. From before time until the end of time, which never has it doesn't have a beginning, it has no end. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is as He is. He's always been. That's never going to change. So every prophet taught about this. His names, His attributes, unchangeable. So this has always been there. Similarly, the beliefs in all of the unseen, angels, the books, the prophets, destiny, qadr, khayrihi wa sharrihi, the day of judgment, resurrection, and all of those unseen things in the world to come, which Nabi alayhi salam mentioned, and former prophets as well. These are statics, they never change. So every prophet, in terms of belief, aqidah, there's no difference whatsoever of any type. There's no different forms or shapes. It's all one belief set. And similarly, they all came with basic tenets. Every system of Islam, every system of deen that every prophet came with, it had salat, it had rituals by which we connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and people would connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salat, it had fasting, it had various other rituals. They also had various do's and don'ts, sharia, right, which was very similar. Okay, so this basic deen and this basic belief set and these principles and injunctions, this is known as deen, a system. And this system is also known as Islam. And Islam, as we have discussed in other lectures and other talks, we've discussed in detail about Islam, and the basic meaning of Islam is submission. Submission. So the only acceptable form of life and the only acceptable system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts from His bondsmen is a lifestyle of submission. Submission to what? To the deen. That set of beliefs and those injunctions and those do's and don'ts, etc., which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent. So now this Islam submission, there's two dimensions of that. One is the comprehensive dimension of the beginning of the sending of prophets up into the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As we mentioned, they all came with the same belief sets, and they all came with this announcement that whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ordering us to do, we must do that. And whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is prohibiting us from, we need to, cease and desist. Okay. So that basic those basic principles, those are aesthetic as well, and as we mentioned, that's continuous. And so the deen which is acceptable to Islam, which is submission, in that sense it is that submission which is from the Prophet Adam alayhi salam to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, there's a problem here, because people they confuse this concept that, okay, the previous prophets were also Muslims and they also practiced Islam, and so if you follow any of those, you're fine. But they fail to understand that just like وَلِلَّهِ مَثَلَ الْأَعْلَى, for example, we have a series of presidents in the United States, right? Today we have President Biden, then we have before Bush, and then Trump, and Obama, and of course we're not going to equate them to prophets, don't get me wrong here, but just to sort of, as we say, taqrib al-masala, so we understand. So now, during the Biden administration, we can't say, well, during the Trump time, or during Obama's time, or during George Washington's time, or Abraham Lincoln's time, this was what the laws and rules and regulations of the country are in a continuous, the principles are based on the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, right? But as legislation continues, so there are laws that abrogate laws that came previously. So you can't say, well, that's what Abraham Lincoln said, or that's what George Washington said, or that's what Obama said, or even Trump. So now, what abrogations have taken place? This is the law now. Not saying that at that time that law was not valid and applicable, yes. So similarly, during the time of Musa alayhi salam, that was the form of Islam that any other would not be acceptable. When Isa alayhi salam came, now this is the form of Islam that has to be applied, and previous Islam, or the previous forms, even Musa alayhi salam, is to be, discarded. Of course, there are going to be similarities which are going to continue. So every prophet who came with the upgraded version of Islam. It was all Islam. There was upgrades and there was, additions. And the final edition, the final upgrade was Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is the only acceptable deen. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said the only acceptable deen is Islam. So in general sense, submission, which was always the teachings of the prophets, and then that total, or that final, the final edition, the final, and you could also say the completion of that whole system was with the advent of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So therefore, all the previous systems have been abrogated, and only the system of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam will be acceptable. And so now, what about the people of the book? We mentioned that earlier in Surah Baqarah. We mentioned the Jews. They knew that. We mentioned yesterday some of the Jewish rabbis. They came and they recognized that actually Medina was the place of the final migration, and etc. And the attributes of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam were known to them. So why did they not all accept Islam? And we mentioned that in Surah Baqarah, because of disease in their hearts, knowing full well. So therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, and the people who have been given the book, they didn't differ, and particularly the inference here is differing in accepting Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam or not, despite of the fact that they had received knowledge. Illa min ba'di, and they didn't differ except after they had been given knowledge, so they had no excuse. So what was it that caused them to differ? Baghyan bainahum. This, transgression, some against others. What was the transgression based on? As we said, if we accept Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in their estimation, we're going to lose our position, we're going to lose our supremacy. We were the authorities of deen. People looked up to us. That's going to come to an end, as they thought. So, because of their jealousy, because of their abstinence and arrogance, they were mahroom, as we say. They were deprived of the blessings of guidance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us. وَمَن يَكْفُرْ, and whoever disbelieves and denies and turns his back on the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we mentioned those signs in here, particularly the signs which are the signs, every ayat is a sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, therefore it's called an ayat, meaning a sign. So all the verses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also the various signs of spread out throughout the universe, and particularly the signs in his books, previous ones, and Quran, then verily Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Sari al-Hisab. He's very fast in retribution. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us understanding of this book and give us the ability to implement it. Ameen. Thumma ameen. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalamu alaikum.